All right, let's do a very quick check-in with Chapter 6 of Gulliver's Travels, where we learn that the Lilliputians get buried head first because they believe the Earth is flat and is going to rotate so that when the resurrection comes, they'll be standing on their feet. A really cool thing of they're quite shocked to find that people in his country are only governed by penalties, whereas in the Lilliputian country, if after a certain number of years it can be shown that they've have an unstained kind of moral character, they get rewarded for it. They get money for it. Also, that if someone tries to inform on you and it's proved to be false, then the guy who tried to inform you is immediately put to death, and you get all his monies. And if they don't have enough monies to kind of cover for your charges, your hurt, your pain, the crown will supply it, which is indeed an interesting little note there. There's a whole thing at the end where he gets accused of fooling around with the wife of a treasurer, who I guess there's some informants doing that, and it kind of poisons him with him. And the treasurer, being so close to the emperor, that kind of poisons the well with the emperor. It's like, okay, this is a 6-inch lady. I don't know exactly how much fooling around there could be, but that is the case. I guess doesn't matter what. I mean, we know he's really amazingly endowed, but that's basically physically impossible. What's that kind of, when you get into that kind of range of things? So that's weird. There's plenty of other stuff in there. Oh, the education, how they educate. No, the parents aren't in charge of the education. Indeed, the kids get taken away from the parents and are raised. We still keep all the class divisions. The richies get the rich education. The middle get the middle. The mean ones get, for servants, get that kind of education, and the ones who are just tillers of earth don't get an education at all. They get to stay with their parents. So there's all that of, guess, they going from the idea that, well, the only reason parents make kids is for the sexual pleasure. So they're not really thinking about what that's going to do to the kids, and they shouldn't really, because that's what the only thoughts were. They should be the ones who should be entrusted with the education of their children. And just because you can make kids doesn't mean you can educate them, I guess. So yeah, interesting alternative society there, and interesting alternative thoughts, all obviously reflecting back on England. Let's take a look at the notes. All right. I'm going to do a very quick thing of the notes. The notes definitely talks about how Swift takes some of his inspirations here from actual voyage accounts, but also probably more specifically from Thomas More's Utopia, on kind of the ordering of society, and also is it William Temple, the hinges, an image found in Temple's essay of heroic virtue, is the two great hinges of all government, reward and punishment, were nowhere were turned with greater care, nor exercised more bounty and severity. So we've got that. We've got the whole thing of satire rejects cultural relativism, insisting on universal truths about human nature and societies. Swift shares the view of his first patron, William Temple, who, after consideration of the Peruvian religion and government, wrote in his essay of heroic virtue, "It must, I think, be allowed that human nature is the same in these remote as well as in other more known and celebrated parts of the world." So, it's not just so there's some universals he seems to have. Definitely pointing out the whole thing of the didactic nature of how to raise proper young ladies, that nursemaids are beaten and lashed and banished for trying to tell foolish fairy tales and stories to young women, especially in Plato's Republic. Children's stories and fables are censored, and nurses and mothers are induced to tell stories only from the state's prescribed list in order to cultivate virtue in the young. And that seems to be especially a thing about about women is, it's like, I mean, they're taking the education of women seriously, but you have but a few years to be young and handsome in the eyes of the world. Yes, that's the other thing. It's like, well, we have to educate you because you're not going to be pretty forever. You also need to be, yeah, you have but a very few years. This is, I guess, a letter to a young lady on her marriage, 1725. You have but a very few years to be young and handsome in the eyes of the world, and as few months to be so in the eyes of a husband who is not a fool. You must therefore use all endeavors to attain some degree of those accomplishments which your husband most values in other people. You must improve your mind by closely pursuing such a method of study as I shall direct or approve of you. You must get a collection of history and travels, which I recommend to you, and spend some hours every day in reading them. Swift's is progressive in supporting female education, but a principal purpose of female education is for the woman to become reasonable and agreeable a reasonable and agreeable companion. So it's all about making you a good wife, not necessarily just making you a well-educated person. So yeah, I will leave it there. Other than apparently when he's protesting all about, this woman never came to visit me in secret. Nobody done that. But apparently in the very next chapter, a person the revelation in the next chapter that, quote, a considerable person at court came to my house very privately at night in a closed chair. So yes, how much we should believe Gulliver, how gullible we should be about Gulliver is always a good question. All right, I will leave it there. More videos later.